Welcome to Hip Hop Now Podcast. If you're from the future, you know what to do. Get your ass out of here. Don't disrespect the legend. Hip hop is here to stay. Let's get right into the business. What up, y'all? I am your host, Vegas, and this is Hip Hop Now Podcast, a podcast specifically designed to keep you caught up on all things hip hop, music, and culture that happened throughout the week. Big shout out to all of the subscribers, all of the legacy listeners, and more importantly, also those that just joined us as new listeners to this podcast on audio form, wherever you get your podcasts, but especially those on YouTube, because the goal, if you go back a couple of episodes, I'm from the future now. I get out of here, I guess. But if you go back a couple of episodes, the goal for 2025 was to hit 5,000 subscribers on YouTube. And I'm here to announce at the end of February, Black History Month, by the way. That's my Black History Month voice. We have reached 5,024 total subscribers on YouTube. So first and foremost, give yourself a round of applause. I appreciate you. Again, it doesn't matter if you've been listening to this podcast in audio form for years, 9 years to be exact, or you found this podcast through YouTube and you watch the weekly news podcast that this is, or even if you just like the shorts I post as a part of this channel. So appreciate it. And with that being said, I mean, they call me Vegas. And I'm from New York City. I'm from the big city, okay? So it's only right that we push that goal to 10,000 subscribers. Why not? Right? Again, I'm not hating, but I've watched people with 100,000 subscribers eat Cheetos with tomato sauce. I'm not even joking. On YouTube, 100K, probably more now. So an informative hip hop, music, and culture podcast like this one, weekly, along with live streams and other bonus content, shouldn't have that much problem hitting 10,000 by the end of this year. So we'll see. So again, I appreciate everybody who's already subscribed. Keep checking out the content, but more importantly, share it with other hip hop heads and other hip hop groups that you know would also enjoy this kind of content. Okay? And there's plenty of content to go around. Like I said last week on last week's episode, we're going to do more interviews, but it's not going to become an interview-based podcast. I'm not looking to get everybody. I'm looking to get interviews based off of timing and with people who I think would make for more interesting interviews and, for my audience. But more importantly, they're not necessarily hitting every single podcast known to man. So when it comes to my podcast, you don't get anything. But I'm going to make sure you get something. So stay tuned for that. Stay tuned for more content. Big shout out to hiphopdx.com, djbooth.net, Ambrosia for Heads, and a couple of places where I get some of my stories from. Let's get right into the business, though. So I believe I mentioned this before that Nipsey Hussel has a posthumous album on the way. And I had my thoughts about it because depending on, let me put it like this. Gangstar's last album is a perfect example of what a great posthumous album is. For those who don't know, posthumous just means that the artist is already deceased after the release of this album, right? Or I mean, not after. They were deceased before the release of this album. So Gangstar's last album was a perfect example of that because it sounded and felt like Guru was a part of the entire process. Bad versions, and I'm not going to name any bad, but you know them if you know them. Bad versions to me are when you really only got couple of verses, half a verse, a hook, and then you just flood the album with features to fill those gaps. It never feels like the artist is still around to create another solo album. In this instance, it always feels like, a featured album. Now, granted, in this day and age, to be quite honest with y'all, most of these albums tend to feature somebody on every song. Like, that's just kind of what it's been. So maybe it's not as bad. Like, I like the Pop Smoke album that came out. And I wasn't no big Pop Smoke fan. I thought some of his records were cool, but I liked it because it felt like something he would make. And again, these artists nowadays tend to have a ton of features, so it just made sense. But Nipsey Hussle was different because Nipsey, even though he had his features, the majority of the music he put out when he was on a project, it was him, you know. And I assume there's enough there to have new songs from Nipsey because I know he got a lot of verses out there, but we shall see. So this is coming from hiphopdx.com. Nipsey Hussle posthumous album should be out around the summer, his brother says. And his brother Black Sam has confirmed a posthumous album from the late rapper will be arriving this summer. He was on Power 106's Brown Bag Morning Show on Wednesday when he revealed the LP will be a joint project with Bino Redux. I don't know who that is. And that it was recorded before Nipsey was killed in 2019. Oh, there we have it. Let's read this quote real quick. If Hustle didn't actually do the verse or work with the person or put together the blueprint for the project, we not doing it. This is what Nipsey's brother's saying, Sam. He did something with Bino, and there's a new project that we're about to release. This was a project that he had with Bino that was pretty much like 80% finished. This is wonderful news. Now, granted, I'm not familiar with Bino. Maybe he's worked with Nipsey before and it'll be fine, but I'm hoping for something that's actually good because, again, when you have, like, we'll give the Eternal example, when you have artists like Tupac, who was recording all the time, recording mad songs, and when he passed, they were just putting out everything. It felt like it was like every month or so we had a new Tupac album. The problem with that is Tupac probably didn't want all those records out, and it was clear that there were certain songs where he was trying to get off a concept and he just had different versions of that. You know what I'm saying? And he probably settled on one that he liked, and the others weren't supposed to see the light of day. And those who know this podcast know it's the Thug Mansions, the Ghetto Heavens, like everything that had to do with a ghetto in heaven. Like, I wonder if heaven got a ghetto. That was probably the best one, to be honest. But you could see that Tupac was making an attempt to nail that concept down for a record. So he had all these different records. Thug Mansion featuring Nas, I believe. Uh, so I feel like if the songs are dope, then cool. But if it's something that maybe Nipsey was working on and was cool with, 80% of it, then it should be dope if they're able to complete the other 20% and make it mesh with the album, and especially if he was cool with it. He liked what was there. That we'll never know, but it is dope to know that in the summer of 2025 we'll have a new Nipsey Hustle album to bump, and just fingers crossed that is good. Okay, that's all we can hope for, is that it's good. Jim Jones, and y'all know him. He been all over the internets saying he on box Cam. Let's put 10 million up. We're gonna go and we're gonna box. He's been making these requests of a lot of rappers. He's been looking to battle a lot of rappers. And I'm not gonna lie, it seems pretty desperate because half the time when he says this, they just ignore him. And it's really clear. And someone who's a fan on that side would say, yo, that's why they scared, because Jimmy got the no, man, they're just not going to give him what he wants. He knows the shine over there with Cam and Mace is much bigger than the shine he got now. But I'm here to tell y'all, Jimmy just dropped a new album, and I got some thoughts. You've seen the title, so we just talking hip hop. But you know what happens when it comes to my reviews. The first listen is just checking it out. Let me just get the vibes. What it sound like? What, stuff like that. Second listen, okay, I'm gonna listen to the bars a little bit more, listen to the beats, check out how songs are sequenced and how it flows and all that good stuff. And then the third listen is just to confirm my thoughts. Jim Jones dropped an album called At the Church Steps, which I don't has a total of 17 songs, and time wise comes in around 55 minutes. My kind of album. Make it quick, fam. I don't want to be here that long with you. Okay. A couple of features on here. Some of these people I've never heard of, but there are others I've heard of, like Davies, obviously, Fabio Foreign. Fabulous is on here also. Conway the Machine is also on here, I believe. I believe he's on here also. And the quick review for those who just need to know straight up, is it good or not? I'll just say this is the best Jim Jones album since El Capo, which those who heard that album know that's probably the best one in his catalog, hands down. At least that's how I feel. Little quick history lesson with me with Jim Jones. I wasn't a big fan early on. I didn't think he could rap. And I'm not talking about balling and all that. I'm talking about early Jim Jones, right? Dipset, mixtape Jim Jones. But at some point, and I'm not going to get into all of that with Max B. I know, okay? I know. Stack bundles, I know. But Jimmy got better. And even though I didn't like all his projects, he started getting closer to a vibe I could vibe with, to be honest. And when I heard El Capo, I was like, yo, this is hands down Jim Jones' best material, man. This is great. Well, At the Church Steps, to me, picks up that mantle. And he's had albums in between then, which I didn't really like. But this the one. And a lot of it has to do, just for those who don't know, a lot of it has to do with what Jimmy talks about, how he talks about it, how vulnerable he tends to be in his lyrics, right? He acknowledges his flaws. Like Jim Jones is clearly, like, especially when you see him in an interview, he's clearly like what Nas said on Stillmatic, Second Childhood. There's certain things that you feel like at this stage he should give up, right? As far as the things he does and the way he talks. He's not doing that. He's not embarrassed by it. And I think the fact that he's transparent about his lifestyle and life and what's happening, you can just say, all right, I may not agree with it, but that man could do what he wants to do. And it kind of comes down to, is the music good? And I feel like the music is good. Now, I'll tell you like this, listening to me, I have my opinion, and it's mine alone. You may agree, but if you've never liked Jim Jones, like, I mean, ever, nothing he ever put out, nothing he says, you think he childish, you think like, yo, why he rhyming in front of the garbage can, like, why he look like that? Why is he an old YN? Whatever you feel like, yo, I just don't like him. This will not convince you to listen or like him. It just won't. It won't. And that's for everybody. But in that gray area, if you like the song here and there and you really thought like, yo, that El Capo joint, I do like that one, I think you would like this one. I think you would like At the Church Steps. Of course, Jimmy starts off acknowledging with a song called Jomo, which is the name most people are close to him known by. He says his grandmother gave it to him and it was a spiritual thing. Where, that was a single and he addressed a lot of what was being said. He also addresses, like, Kim saying, yo, you're not from Harlem. you were born in the Bronx. And he said something like, um, I forget the term, but it was almost like the Bronx, like I was born in the Bronx and Harlem raised me or something like that. Which again is what I said, being a transparent, because if Cam's whole hook getting at him was you not even from Harlem and you claiming Harlem all crazy more than us when this is where you were from, Jim is coming from the standpoint of, yes, the Bronx is where I was born, and but I embraced Harlem. It's kind of like Tupac, right? Like even me, I feel like Tupac might as well be from Oakland or the West Coast because it's what he embraced the most. But he was born and practically raised in New York City, right? He only went to high school in Bmore, and he went to a special high school, you know what I'm saying, for the arts, renowned in Bmore. So he would never really be from Bmore, but he's always embraced the West Coast more, even before Death Row, than than he did NY. Even though his whole crew of outlaws are from Jersey and all of that, he just at least lyrically and publicly embraced the West Coast. So most people wouldn't say, nah, he from New York or nah, he from Bmore. So I think that's where you find Jim Jones in a lot of ways. It's like, yeah, Bronx is where I was born and probably raised for a certain amount of time because I don't know the details. I don't care about all this where you from, except for Brooklyn. But you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not as mad at that as some would be. And then also, he says on this album, and we're going to get into a little bit. Well, we're kind of getting into it anyway, but he says because the other thing that was said about him was that not Cam said that Mace taught you how to rhyme, and on this album, Jim Jones has a rebuttal for that says they taught me how to rap, or like what he said, they taught me how to rap. I went platinum. Now I lap them. Right? For those who don't know, pause. We're not talking about actual laps, right? Your legs. We're talking about in a race. When you're running a race and I run so fast that I meet you, I come back around and I meet you where you are and keep going. That's like lapping you. Like Captain America did to Falcon in one of them Marvel movies. Um, and that was interesting because this album is like pretty dope. I mean, it has some standout records for me, like Dope Boy and Walking on Business featuring Conway. Jomo is dope. Genesis is dope to me. There's a lot of records I like in here. What's Going On with Dave East was dope. I like the way Jim put his rhymes together on there. Mano's on here too. I didn't even notice that. That's a damn shame. But with this album, and especially those people who are fans of Jim Jones, like since like maybe early 2000s, where they felt like he turned a corner, to them, his catalog is pretty rock solid. And a lot of his flow and all of that and what he talks about hasn't really changed. Church is a reoccurring theme in his catalog. Like I think he got a joint called On My Way to Church. So I look at it and I'll say this to that question. Has Jim Jones him and Mace? What is he talking about? Is he talking about sales? Units sold? I find that hard to believe because Mace's first album is probably, if it's not Diamond, it's probably close to it. And I don't know if Jimmy has ever gotten that close. I don't even know if he has a platinum album, it's probably the one with Ballin' on it. Other than that, I can't see him lapping them when it comes to sales at all. Mace or Cam. Does he mean lyrically? Wow. I don't think so either because sure, maybe he's lapped Mace when it comes to releases, right? Because Mace has really only had what, like 2 or 3 albums, and the first one is probably the biggest success, but probably not his best. The second one was definitely a flop in a lot of ways. His Welcome Back is, people forgot that even came out. And then I think he released like a mixtape, but that's when he kept going back and forth with I'm rapping, I'm back again to I'm a pastor again. And is his catalog better than Cam's catalog? Nah. Cam got too many joints. Like I know a lot of people who love, like literally love different Cam albums, and that's kind of like unheard of. Some people love Confessions of Fire. Me, I'm Sports, Drugs, and Entertainment. Some people love Come Home With Me, right? I was gonna say Purple Tape. Uh, what's the name of that Cam album? The Purple Joint. That's not the name of it, old folk that are listening. I'm just trying to remember. It's Purple something. Purple Haze, okay? Um, Killer Season. Like there are people who like these albums. So I don't think he has a better catalog than Cameron. But again, going back to lyrically, is he better lyrically? No. Either one. Either one. You can go and listen to the Bad Boy stuff and say this is not better than Jim Jones, but Murder Mace is a real thing, and it's around. Look up the diss record when Mace was dissing Cam. There was a lot of bars in there. That was Murder Mace, right? So I don't think he's lapped them in any way, but he has brought himself up to peer status with them. No longer capo. Like if you consider them bosses lyrically, I think Jim Jones has brought himself up to their tier as far as uh the output of music, it being dope, stuff like that. But again, lyrically better? No, not at all. But I'll just say this, At the Church Steps, like I said before, if you like the El Capo album that he put out a few years ago, you like the vibe of the music, you like the lyrics, this is the same thing. There was really only one song that I knew I was going to skip every time, and it's called White Lines. And when it started, I thought it was going to be dope because I love the original record, right? And it was also used by Mobb Deep for Quiet Storm. So I just thought I was automatically going to love it. And something about it is just, I think they could have gave it a little bit more boom bap and then Jim just do what he does. It kind of feels a little bit more like the original and is a little bit more dancey, which wasn't a big deal because there's a lot of skating rink references, and that's a song that back especially back in the days when it came to going skating in New York, records like White Lines always got played. But it's kind of like how he's flowing to that beat that I don't like. And it just doesn't sound good compared to everything else you hear. So uh there you have it. To me, again, Jim Jones At the Church Steps. Right now, between this and West Side Gun, if I was making a super early top 5, they would be there. Now, will they be there at the end of the year? I don't know. I kind of doubt it because there's some heaters on the way, but who knows? Maybe they flop. So we'll see. What do you think about Jim Jones's new album, At the Church Steps? Are you a fan of Jim Jones? Do you care? Whatever. Like, leave your comments in the comment section below. That's what you got to do. And lastly, all right, y'all. So it was a slow news week for hip hop, music, and culture, not arrest and beefs. Unless it's a rap beef, I might get into that because there's some bars involved. But there wasn't a lot to report. And there was a bonus episode that was like in the back of my mind that I wanted to do a while back. But I don't believe it necessarily needs to be a bonus episode. So I'm going to do that right here. And that's me thinking about like, yo, there are a couple of MCs who are notably nice and influential in this rap game that almost never get mentioned when people talk about their top 5s, their top 10s, their top 20s, the top 50s. Like There's somewhere, it's maybe somewhere in the top 50s they're shuffled, but sometimes you got to go to 100 just to see them, and it's kind of blasphemous considering how dope these individuals are and how many other MCs who we do put in front of them in some cases were influenced by. And I don't mean I was influenced and then I came up with my own style. I mean, like, no, you can draw a direct line from that person's flow to this guy's flow. So I came up with a list of 5, and I want you to do the same in the comment section. Who I think need to get mentioned a little bit more when it comes to top MCs historically, right? Not right now, but just historically. So let's start off at the top. Tretch from Naughty by Nature. If you know, you know. When Tretch came out on Naughty by Nature, nobody was rhyming like Tretch. That's why everybody was so attracted to his music. You know what I'm saying? Because his flow was trump tight, his breath control was great. His voice was clear when he said words. He had hits like OPP that could be played on the radio. Then he had joints like Ghetto Blaster. I'm gonna say that on this podcast because it's a family podcast, but you know what I mean. Um, that told stories, you know what I'm saying? Yoke the Joker, that was more like, competitive spirit rhyming. And he ghost ripped for others, gave them hits off of his flow. And most notably, one of the people who pointed out, on some homage stuff about him was Eminem. But you just don't hear Tretch's name enough when it comes to that. It's almost people forget how dope Tretch was. So that's one. No order, by the way. I'm just saying them. Big Pun. Big Pun was just here not long ago, y'all. Rest in peace. Big Pun was crazy. Big Pun wordplay was bananas, and what made it even crazier was the fact that as a huge individual as far as weight, his breath control seemed unmatched. For somebody who's saying all those words at that speed all together, and feeling like you're supposed to take a breath here, but instead you're able to go longer without taking a breath, which is crazy. But more importantly, it was just the way he, in all of his rhymes, like all you have to do is listen to, if you've never heard Big Pun's debut album, Capital Punishment, the first song will tell you all you need to know before you even get to everything else. Pun was a monster when it came to wordplay and rhyming. And that's why, again, just similar to Tretch, he was also able to make records that were catchy and have like a hit, basically. So even though I know there's some people who include Big Pun on their list, I just never hear it enough. I kind of, how I go. You hear the same names all the time. Big J, Nas, Tupac, and then a few others. Next, Pharaoh Monch. I can't even understand how Pharaoh Monch doesn't show up in at least top 15. And again, we're talking about spitters, right? We're not just talking about impact, who's great and who most people feel are the best. We're talking about people who put in work lyrically, not storytelling, or catchy hooks, but lyrically. If you break it down to putting Pharaoh Monch and Pun and Tretch in a cipher, you going to hear some ish. Lyrically, they're trump tight. And what I like most about Pharaoh Monch is Pharaoh Monch has a wordplay that can be similar in some ways, as far as the wordplay, not the flow, the wordplay, similar to a Tretch or a Big Pun or even a Black Thought. But Pharaoh Monch is like stop and start with his. It's so dynamic that you can't even. You would have to rehearse it in order to, predict the flow, predict how the line's going to end, predict the next word. He is, what's the term for it? You basically, he's unpredictable. Lyrically, with his flow, his delivery is completely unpredictable, and he's dumb nice with it, right? If you love I Gave You Power off of Nas's It Was Written, Go listen to Organized Confusion's I think the Stress album, and I think it was a song called Stray Bullet, where they tell the story of a bullet traveling through the air, um, mostly from the bullet's perspective. It's crazy, and that's not all he's done, but he just doesn't get mentioned enough to me when it comes to some of these top lists. Beanie Siegel, come on, man. When Beanie arrived, everybody was like, "Yo, that dude is nice," And don't get me wrong, the albums are hit or miss here and there. I thought The Truth should have been stronger, but The Reason was better. You know what I'm saying? And don't get me started on The Becoming. To me, that's his best album, and that album is a classic. But all the features, the mixtape features on the radio, freestyles, and all of that, Beanie was a problem. The battle with Jadakiss, that wasn't an easy, you know what I'm saying? That wasn't like an easy battle for Jadakiss at all. You know what I'm saying? Beanie Siegel just doesn't get mentioned enough. And I think a lot of it also has to do with he dropped The Becoming, which is arguably his best album before he went to prison. And I believe when he came back or while he was in prison, he put out a really lame album after that. I forget what it was called. I might have said it early. The Reasoning or something. It was something. I don't know. But whatever that last album was with the hat and suit and coat, it was just bad. And then, unfortunately, he got shot, and I think he had to have a lung removed, and all of this affected his voice. So now, he can't even put out material to continuously remind people. He can't really go to Funk Flex now, and you feel like that's the Beans I remember from before, because he sounds totally different, and it's probably more of a strain to say certain things in certain ways, which impacts your flow. So Beanie Siegel's one, and the last one I have is Cool G Rap. Y'all gonna stop disrespecting G Rap. Probably everybody on this list he fathered. Okay, everybody says Rakim, KRS-One, even Kane, but a lot of those 90s reality rap, East Coast gangster rap dudes, the blueprint came from Cool G Rap. That wordplay I mentioned and how it comes together and the breath control that Pun had, G Rap was doing that first. G Rap has a serious lisp, but the way he puts words together so smoothly, it doesn't matter. You know what I'm saying? He has the storytelling. He has the wordplay. Like, again, having someone like G Rap appear on Mobb Deep's their third album, Hell on Earth, and having a standout verse is crazy. Because G Rap came out in the 80s, if you didn't know this. Also, a few years later, in the early 2000s, RZA and I think Master Killer, I think this was on Master Killer album, but a song with RZA called Cakes, where G Rap gets busy on that record. He came out in the 80s. This is in the 2000s. And he still has it today. So those are my five. I think they don't get enough credit for what they've done lyrically. I think in a lot of ways they've been pushed out the way because either people just forgot, or like in the case of Beanie Siegel, you really forget because the output isn't what it used to be. But all in all, to me, there are 5 MCs who are deserving to be on anybody's top 10 or any top 15, 25 list. What's on your list? Leave your comments in the section below on YouTube or wherever you get this podcast, especially if it's in audio form. This podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and everywhere else. We are on the road to 10,000 subscribers now. So, if you enjoy this content, hit that like button. If you love it and want to hear or see more, subscribe to the podcast right here on YouTube. But more importantly, share with people enjoy this kind of content. To get regular updates from me about the podcast and other things hip-hop, Follow me on any social media platform at Vegas World INC. I promise you, as soon as you type it in, you'll be like, oh, there we go. Until next time, y'all, I'm not a critic. I'm a fan. Peace.